Hello, I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel, based at Bempton on the Yorkshire coast. But today we're doing something very different. We're out in the Lake District in Cumbria. We're near Keswick and Durwood Water. And after some spell of wet weather, we've got some wonderful clear skies, wonderful reflections. And as you can see, the wonderful vista of the water and the hills in the background, with the mist coming over the hills. And obviously it's early morning, so we've got the boats just starting to get busy for their busy day of taking passengers around the lake. It's wonderful colours, and now is a real opportunity to capture some magic in watercolour with the reflections. So it's going to be an interesting series of exercises. And don't forget, we've got our free watercolour guide, which is yours to keep, and it's in the description below, so please grab a copy. I mean, if you're just coming back to watercolour, or you are just wanting to learn watercolour for the first time, it's a useful guide and it will just get you started in watercolour. And please grab a copy, it's yours for free. So the plan today is to do a bit of exploring, look at the light, look at the colours, take some photographs, do a bit of sketching, and then take an assessment of what we've got, go back to the studio, and then we'll work from there. Okay, so as you can see, we're down at the waterfront at Keswick. It's lovely now. The weather is clearing. We had that bit of rain, which has disturbed the first couple of days, but now it really is wonderful. And the reflections are something special. The water has calmed, and you really are getting that glass-like reflection, but we're getting that shimmering, that little bit of ripples on the water, which is really going to be something that we really want to try and capture, which is going to be magical. And then obviously you've got the trees in full green, again reflecting into the water. So you're getting those darks, and looking at the shapes of the reflections, how you get those shafts of light coming through from the trees and from the objects into the water, which is really special. And of course the boats, these old boats, which go back to, I understand, something like the 1920s, and some of them are even older, are really wonderfully colourful and full of character, full of history, and they have that special look about them. And combining them with the water and the boats will really give a painting some punch into its colour. So I wanted to really incorporate the boats, I think, into the picture. But of course, the hills, I mean, you've got all that wonderful magentas and crimsons in the hills and the lights, and all that is really special. And as you can see, we've got that effect of shimmer. The painting I think we're going to do is one of the boats. We're going to settle on the boats, and that is really going to be the painting that we're going to tackle today. Okay, so we're going to start with the sketch, and we're simplifying the scene that we've got. So we're going to concentrate on just 3 boats, and the first one is going to be that central boat, which is in the water cascading those lovely reflections. So I'm going to get that proportions right of these. So the first thing we've got to do is establish the horizon line, which is going to be sort of a 1/3, 2/3, because I'm going to have a lot of water to get in. And then we're going to place the boats. I'm going to have one central boat which is focusing and looking towards us, whereas the other 2 are both leaning into the picture, but actually you only see 2/3 of the boats. So the key now is to sketch the boats in, and I'm concentrating on that first boat in the middle. I want to get that shape right. It's an elliptical shape, and it drops down in the front. If you can notice that element, that's important because it has that focus towards the front, which has got that lovely sort of rowing boat shape. And then we're going to put the other 2 in place as well, and just carefully keep the details to a minimum, but make sure you get the essential shapes. And then we'll finish off with the mountain range in the backdrop. Okay, so now we're going to start with the painting. I'm going to start with the sky, work my way through the picture from the top of the page to the bottom, and the sky is going to be a lovely wetting wet with a little bit of crisp cloud in there as well. So I'm going to start with ultramarine and Prussian blue, which is going to mix together. I'm going to drop those onto a moist surface. So it wants to be moist, so we put that water in place, but we've kept a few edges in place, so there's a few dry spots, and we're going to drop that colour in, push it around, trying to capture that feeling of the lovely blue sky coming through the clouds, and drop that in, let it soak in. It will find its edges, it will find it diffuse in place, and then I'm going to mix a little bit of grey, where it's going to be essentially alizarin crimson and a little bit of blue, which will just create a bit of a purple. So the blue is going to be sort of cobalt blue, really, essentially, and drop that in. Carefully let it diffuse and just drag it into the blue in parts, and then just carefully let it settle and just watch it dry. Now the thing is, the paper will moisten and it will dry at different rates, so you just need to carefully watch that, and I will just touch it up a little bit with the brush just to give it some control. Now after letting that dry, we're now going to concentrate on the mountain range in the back, and those are going to be transparent blues and purples that we're going to drop in there, and they're going to diffuse across, have a crisp edge into the sky, but nonetheless they're going to diffuse across the expanse of the horizon with blue on the distance, and then we're going to move into the middle with purple, and then moving over to the right with greens and a cobalt blue, so you get that transition of colour. I'm going to let those soften in, and I'm going to let them diffuse, and as they diffuse they might need to get a little bit of a touch here and there with the brush, just to ensure that there are no undesirable effects that can be created, and let that dry. Now while we're letting the horizon line dry, I'm going to concentrate on getting the boats in place and getting those colours in, and we're starting with the central boat, which is facing towards us. Got that lovely sweep as we've drawn, and then we're going to concentrate on those middle tones, getting the range of colours. We've got some rich oranges of the planks near to the top of the boat, and then as it drops down it gets some sort of mahogany type colour, which drops down to a lovely red at the bottom on the plimsoll line of the actual boat itself. And those are going to be yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, and then coming down to a cadmium red at the bottom, all along using a little bit of purple, alizarin crimson or purple lake here and there, just to give them a little bit of a change, colour change. And then as I put those colours in, I'm then going to start to drop in some deeper darks, which are going to be ultramarine blue and burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson, and vary those. So some are going to be deeper darks than others. So I'm going to gradually build up a little bit of detail and a little bit of shape into this boat. It's important that I get the essence of the boat in place and build up its character. So now we're going to move to the left and right boats. Again, the same process. We're going to put those warm, rich mahogany type colours in place with the burnt siennas and some cadmium red and some orange in there to just build up those lovely colours. And then we're going to drop in some darks, and just while it's on the moist to create that feeling of shape. Both of them are coming from the peripheries of the painting, so they're both on the left and the right. They want to be slightly more diffused than the one in the centre. That will help us lead our eye into the picture, so a little bit more diffusion with the darks, and put that in. And then I'm also going to use some sharper colour, richer colour, orange for the life buoys on each one, and build up a little bit of character like we've done with the central one. Enough character. We'll finish them off again later, but I want to get a feeling for those boats. Okay, so now we've got the boats in, we're going to concentrate back towards the distance, and we're going to try to get the trees that are in front of the mountains. And they're going to need to have a warm centre in the middle where the light is catching those trees. And then as we move towards the left and the right, we're going to have use a blue to pale them off and give that feeling of distance really to those. So in essence, we're going to start with mixing a nice, more vibrant green, which is going to be cobalt turquoise with raw umber and a touch of lemon yellow, just to give that extra sparkle initially. And then we're going to, while that is onto a moist surface, I'm going to add in some darks and some blue sides, which are going to be ultramarine blue and raw umber. And they will then give that cooler tone to the overall effect. The colour value of these trees needs to be stronger than the mountains in the background so that they stand forward, but obviously not too strong that they become dominant against the boats. So it's getting that middle tone right. And then when all those colours are in place, I'm then going to go into that and add some darks just to give that feeling of three-dimension to the trees, particularly along the riverbank or the lake. Just as the lake sort of the trees meet, it gets particularly dark there. I'm going to add in some dark into that area, which is going to be ultramarine blue and raw umber, and just drop that in just to give that feeling of three-dimension, and that will hopefully give you that sense of lovely diffused trees but have that sort of three-dimensional effect. Okay, so now we're going to come to the really exciting part of this painting, which is going to be the water and the reflections and the light, and that will really bring the whole thing together, because at the moment it's a little bit disjointed, particularly having this large area of white paper. So with the reflections, we're going to split it into two sections, and we need to be clear about that. So what we're trying to capture first of all are those soft ripples in the water that are just gently in place that the boats are sitting on. Not the reflections, these are diffused drifts of colour, and we just need to capture that. Essentially, it's going to be alizarin crimson, very pale, that I'm going to bring down. I'm just going to drop that down, and then into that I'm going to drop in some Prussian blue and cobalt blue, which I'm going to place on the surface on a clearly diffused moist surface, not wet and not dry. It's got to be moist, so it just holds on the surface, and those ripples will appear as distant blues initially, and then as we come forward we're going to transition to a little bit more of the crimson again with a little bit of the blue, so you get a very pale purpley colour for the ripples in the foreground. And then while it's on that damp, we can just add extra value of colour in place, just some stronger tones, put those marks in place just for the soft ripples. Do that quickly, and then it will dry, and it will dry with an undercolour of just effectively just floating colour. It'll look like floating colour, and that will give that initial surface upon which we then put in the wonderful reflections. Okay, so now we're going to ensure that that undersurface is thoroughly dry. Now once that's thoroughly dry, we're going to do the exciting bit and put those reflections in that have got the energy and got that soft, delicate feel that really makes the boat sit on the water and come to life. So we're going to start with mixing our colours. We're going to split this into two stages, where we're going to put a lighter grey shadow on initially for the reflections, which is going to be starting on the left boat, and we're going to work our way across from left to right. We'll start on the left boat. We're going to put those shadows in place, which is going to be cobalt turquoise, ultramarine blue, bit of raw umber, and a crimson. So it's a combination of the primary colours, but it will create a bit of variation in there, but you're able to get a dark as well as a light. So that combination of colour is going to be really important. First of all, we're going to make a light grey, and we're going to put the light grey starting on the boat on the left, put that in up against the boat and bring that down, putting in some of those broken ripples with the decisive brush strokes that form away from the main area of reflection. And then once we've done that, we then revisit it with a stronger mix of a similar colour, a little bit more ultramarine and a little bit more crimson in there. And then we're going to drop that in, particularly where the boat just touches the water. So that will give that feeling of depth to the reflection. And it's going to go onto a damp surface, so you're going to drop it in and let it diffuse. So you'll get that mixed effect of the reflection. If you can do it with a little bit of care, you'll get a really magical effect. And we're then going to repeat that process into the middle boat, where we're going to put in an initial lighter, and this one is going to be a slightly browner, slightly sort of warmer reflection, because it's capturing a little bit more of that rich wood of the rowing boat in the water. So we're going to use a little bit more burnt umber, a little bit of yellow ochre in there, just to give that little bit more rich and warmer to it, but still start with a lighter grey and then drop in some dark. But I'm also, with that one, I'm going to put in some, carefully just put some little drifts of lines that are just picking up the reflections of the lines from the boat in the water, and we're just going to drop those in as well. And then I'm going to work from light to dark in the same principle, and then put some really strong underneath the bottom of the boat, and then bring that down into the reflection and just gently drop those in onto a moist surface. And the combination of the light and the dark and those few marks and lines will really make the reflection come to life. And then when that's in place, before we go on to the third boat, which I could have done now, I just take a quick look at it and I realise that I want some more of that sky blue in the sea, just to give it that extra bit of sparkle. So I'm going to mix some Prussian blue with a little bit of cobalt blue, and then with a smallish brush I'm going to drop in some blue, just to give some feeling of sparkle of the reflective nature of the sky coming into the water, and that will just give them extra life into the water around the boats. And then, of course, to finish off, we will then move to the final boat, and again we'll follow the same principle, which will be to put the lighter reflection in first, and then mix some darker reflection, and then just drop the darker into the initial light reflection, so it just diffuses in there. And then as I come down, I'm going to put some squiggles of dark into the water, just to give that feeling of further reflection and further elements in the water, just to give it a little bit more life. And also in the final bit, there's a little bit more, some squiggles in the water that just capture some of the elements from the boat that are just directly reflected in the water. All these little touches just give that little bit more life to the reflections. Okay, so now we're getting to the final stages, which is really taking an overall look at the picture, looking to balance things up as regards tones and darks. But the main thing is to put the details in, put the little touches on the boats that might need putting in place, some of the railings, some of the extra elements that go on the boat. We need to get those in clear. There's some seats at the back. Just reinforce some of the colours in the boats just to make sure that we get the right value in place. And then there's a little bit of a jetty, not so much a jetty, more of a little broken fence and a little bit of land on the right hand side I just want to put in. Again, it's part of leading the eye into the picture nicely. I just want to put those in. That's just going to be a mix of grey put onto a dry surface, but then we'll create a moist area that I'm going to drop in some extra darks, and those darks will just diffuse and they've got that feeling of some structure but a little bit more distant by using that power of diffusion. And then all we're left with is looking at the birds and the elements in the water and the ducks in the water or the geese in the water. What I have done, I've simplified the number. Obviously in reality there was a lot there and I thought it was just too busy and there was too many to really cover. So what I've done is just put a few. I've got one in the foreground that's just sort of walking out of the water, and then I've got a few just back from there which just provide that little bit of extra interest. And I'm just going to put those in with some simple greys and diffuse the grey on the birds so that you just capture that feeling of roundness on there, but make sure that the darks are dark and then there's got an element of diffusion where the feathers are, so it just creates that feeling of roundness. And then all I'm left with now, I'm getting right down to the foreground, because I said we're going to work from back to front, so we're going to work to the foreground, and then it's just a case of putting those little bit of stones in the foreground, the pebble shores, and that's going to be done with mixing a grey that's going to go on with a drag brush effect. When a drag brush effect is literally dragging a brush across a dry surface, so you get a broken feel to a wash, and into that broken feel, and then I'm going to put some darks. I'm going to put a little bit of purple, I'm going to put a little few yellows in there, just to try and give a feeling that there's a shingle beach there. Well, it's not so much beach, but it's a shingle sort of surface. And then also I'm going to put some of the little bits of leaf and twigs and bits and pieces, and those will be the final touches. And then it's a case of just sitting back, having a look, and once we're happy with it, yeah, that's your finished picture. Okay, so there we have it, the finished picture. I put a mount round it to show it off as normal. I'm just going to talk a little bit through this, just to recap what we've done, because it really is about 4 steps again that we've done to make this picture. Looks complicated, but the reality is when you put these steps and deal with these individual steps, they're quite simple, the steps, but it's putting them together is the key. We did the sketch, simplified the scene, and then we painted the sky, and then we dealt with the boats and did individual detail of the boats, and then we put the water on, and the water was done in 2 distinct steps, one for the underwash and then the reflections. And having those steps between the picture is the key. I mean, this looks complicated, you might think, oh, it's far too much for me. The reality is you can simplify it. You could just do one boat with a little bit of background and do the middle of the picture if you fancy having a go at this, and I hope you do. But the reality is if you do those simple steps and just let the paper dry between the steps, you really get a great result. And honestly, you'll be very surprised. So go on, have a go. So in the meantime, I'm going to say a big thank you to you all, because we've just hit 2,000 subscribers for the channel, which is a massive achievement, and a big thank you to you, you know, really, because without your effort we wouldn't have achieved this. And so obviously that leaves me to say, please, if you're new to the channel the first time you see it, don't forget to like and subscribe. That get picked up by a wider audience. And it's been a really interesting day. I've thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I hope you will enjoy it too. And all that's left for me to say is keep painting and enjoy.